You need to know the range. You need to know that it can't be lower for a door than the highest person, or you might determine that's the case anyway. The most common value can be used often in things like manufacturing, or even retail. You know, you might be looking at something and saying, well, what do we normally sell these for? And there'll be a few times when something's sold cheaper than, you know, say it's a modem and it's $100, and every now and then you have a bit of a sale and you flog a couple of them off for $50. So you want to know what the mode is. You don't really want to know what the median or the average is. You just want to know what the most common value you sell it for is, and it comes out as $100 because that's how you calculate the mode, and I'll show you how to do that. With summary data, and particularly with data that we're looking at, inferential statistics, particularly when you're trying to infer something, where you're basically looking at probability statistics. Back here. Sorry, I'll just move this up because I don't think you can see it otherwise. Here we are. Correlation strength, the standard deviation comes in. There are a whole bunch of different things. Standard deviation, p-values. There's a whole range of ways of looking at things, and because what you're trying to do with summary data, and when you're doing inferential statistics, is you're making an assumption from a small number about a large number, and that's hazardous. Obviously if you had the whole collection of all the data you needed, you wouldn't need to do any of these. You wouldn't need to find the standard deviation, or, you know, be unlikely that you would need to worry too much about that. But you do need to know confidence intervals, things like, you know, how confident can I be, for instance, that this data I'm assuming to be right about the whole population, how confident can I be in that number? And there's various mathematical things for it. I'll show you, but I don't really expect you to learn to use necessarily. They're all available through using Excel. They're easy to look up on the net and just find out what the actual statistical formula is. They look horribly hairy when you look at the mathematical formula, but in fact they're not that difficult to do, and they're quite easy to either get your own spreadsheet to do it, or if you've got a calculator that does those things, and they can work that stuff out very simply for you. Or you can do it quite simply by using a spreadsheet. If you know what the formula is, you just keep breaking it into single squares and linking them up, and it'll make sense. You do that and sort of test them out to see if it makes sense. So, okay, let's have a look at some data that we can actually use here. Now let's have a look at the average or mean of these figures that we're looking at. So these are the figures we're looking at. We want to know what the average cost in millions is of full strips and slips of a person. We could do that. How about that? So in order to do that, the average or the mean is a set of data values and the sum of all the data values divided by the number of data values. So it's actually let's look at something a little bit different. Alright, I've played a trick on you here, and I'm using my spreadsheet. So I've got the data sitting there, and what I want to do is to work out what's the average cost for injury for all of them. Let's have a look at that. So I select all of those cells. Now you can then look, you should have something that says formula or function Mine's got a function button. You put a sum on it, and it gives me the number of all of these. That's them all added together. So in total is 30,800 million. That's the total number, but in order to make an average of that, I need to divide that sum by the number of things that I'm looking at, so which we've already established was 10. So I'm going to just put a little figure in there, and then I'm going to hit a, where's it, divide by 10, press enter, and nothing happens. Why is that? Oh, it did happen, I just wasn't looking. You want this is the total. What's the average one? So we're looking at this number here, which is $30,800 million. We'll forget about the millions, we'll just call it 30,800. What's the average of all of these? So we want to just get an idea of what the average of all of these is. So it would be that figure there divided by 10. You can do this with a formula if you like, and you just press the equal sign. That's the number we want to divide by 10. I click on that one, hit the divide, which is the little backslash, and press enter, and you got obviously 3,080 is the average of all injury costs. That's the average across all of these 10 variables. So that's saying if you look at all these 10 variables, put them all together, what do we get? An average of 3,080. You could do the same right the way across. You can do exactly the same thing if you want. So all you do again is you do a sum of these. Look at just diseases, and look for the function sum. You'll find it on yours, I'm sure. Make this one equals this. Click on that, and then slash, and then 10 divided by 10, and you can see that that's the average is 2,900. So that's quite interesting, because we're looking at 10. This is the totality. Sorry, I should have put this up here. This is totals. This is totals. The totals are adding together the falls, trips and slips, and the disease together equals 87,000 or 8,700. Sorry. These are the totals. If you want to, you could do the same with the totals. So what's the total cost? The function sum. And once again, you go to get a formula in Excel, you just press the equal sign, and then you can generally click on the one that you want to, the cell that you want it to operate on, and press the divide by 10, and that gives you that. So it's all pretty easy to do. Now, what have we got? It doesn't look, if you find it difficult to sort of follow how you're supposed to do this stuff in Excel and the rest, I'm probably not even going to ask you to do it at any stage during the course. Don't worry about it too much. I'll be giving you information. It's much more, as I said before in my previous talks, statisticians are the people who should do statistics. What you're there to do is to alert what kind of things you should be looking for. Your real job is to look for variables. It's to understand variables, look for variables, control variables. That's the nature of the job of a person who looks after dock health and safety. It's without the data you can't do anything. You know, you've got to have the data. And the data has to come from something. It can come from your observations. It's not a bad place to start, I might say. but observations of one individual are often not terribly accurate. So it's a very good idea to ensure that your data is correct, basically, and to do that you need to record it to get some idea. Now here's once again we're left with these things here. What are these? So these are the interesting bits, really, are these figures that go down here. So we've got the cost of injury and the cost of disease, and we can see the combination between the two and the rest, and it's quite interesting. So we know that injury costs more on average than disease does, but there's not a great deal of difference. 3,080 by 2,990. So you know, it's kind of interesting, but it's not the same across every area, is it? You know, for instance, if you were to just pick out these two figures, body stressing, you'd see that the disease is much more costly than injury is for that. You look at what else? Where else is it bigger? It seems to be the only. Oh yeah, no, here we are. Mental stress, obviously, much more likely to be disease than injury, physical injury. And so you start to get a pattern. You're starting to see patterns, and patterns is what it's all about. You know, you want to get a feel for the patterns of interactions that operate in your business that you're looking at and in the world. So that you can draw reasonable conclusions and do something about it. Because your main aim is to find controls for these. You first of all have to hunt them down. That's one of the hard bits, is to hunt down what the variables might be and what's actually going on. And then the next thing is to look at controls to stop them from happening. And you can't really go finding controls. I mean, you've got to prioritise them. You've got to work out what the risk is. Risk needs data. You know, what is the risk? What is the likelihood of something occurring? And what is the consequence of that risk taking place? And then you've got to look at, you know, how do I convince people to add these control measures that should stop it? Would they in fact stop it? A lot of very interesting stuff comes up when you think about controls, and there's a I know this sounds crazy, but there's a really interesting story. I think it was De Bono, who was, you know, the sort of inventor of lateral thinking, was asked to find out how he could sell flour to the Japanese from the US wheat board. I don't know if this is true or not, by the way, but it sounds good anyway, so I'm going to tell you the story. So anyway, he goes off and you know, how do you sell flour to people who predominantly eat rice? They love eating rice. They eat rice, you know, a lot over the time. Flour is, in a sense, the sort of Western world's rice, as opposed to the Asian. You know, the Asian world doesn't use flour much. So he came up with the idea of making and selling bread machines, you know, bread making machines. You know, you've got those bread makers that a lot of people have them. And the idea was that if you sold, because the Japanese love gadgets, absolutely adore having electrical gadgets in their households, that this would be something that could end up as being really, you know, a wanted gadget, because it's such an interesting, intense kind of tool, if you like. And you know, what would happen then is, of course, you've got to sell flour to make bread, and you know how good fresh bread is. Everybody knows how good freshly baked bread smells, and I don't know what it is, must be in our bloody genes, you know, but it's fantastic, and that was the reason for the making of the bread maker. That's what I've been told. But I have no data, so I cannot prove it. But that's an interesting one. I'm not actually sure why the hell I was telling you that, but anyway, never mind. We'll go on. Let's have a look at this. We've made some. We're stuck with these goddamn tables, and the trouble is, what I hate with tables. is that I really can't see anything in them. I don't sort of look at them and go, oh yeah, that's just so goddamn obvious. You know, that is just, wow, you can really see what's going on there. No, you can't. It's very difficult, even just the way that it's set out at the present time. I have to really look closely at the numbers to see which is bigger and which is smaller. So we can move on to the next look, if you like, which is, let's have a look, what are we looking at next? The median. Now the median of a set of data values is the middle value of the data set when it's been arranged in ascending order, that is, from the smallest value to the highest value. So I've given you just, there's a few numbers here, right? So you've got, if we took the numbers 1, 2, 4, 10, 5, 9, 8, and we wanted to find out what the median was. It's different from the average, or the mode. Sorry, or the mode. Yeah, well, it is in fact different from the mode too. Different from the average, though, and the mean. In that what you do is you lay them out, as I've done here. So now I've put them in order. So I've gone 1, 2, 4, 5, 8, 9, 10. And the median is the central number counting in from it. So if you look at it, it's 1, 2, 4, there's 3 numbers there, 8, 9, 10, 3 numbers there, the one in the middle is what the median is. It's as simple as that. Okay, if you've got, the only time it gets complex slightly is if you've got, for instance, more than, you've got an even number of numbers, so you're obviously not going to find one sitting in the middle. There you end up with 5 and 8 which sit in the middle. You get 3 on each side, 3 on each side, that's all you need. So you then simply you add them together and divide them by 2, which gives you 6.5. so that gives you a 6.5 median. Now I haven't found much use for a median in my statistical life. That doesn't mean that it may not be useful, but if someone talks to you about the median value of a set of data, at least now you know what it is. Sometimes it's more reliable than an average because depending on what they have, what they call far out numbers or outliers, where you've got, say if the data, for instance, here was then 2,942 or 43, and another number was, 79. So that would have to go in differently, wouldn't it? So we'll get rid of that and put it in here. What's going on with my keyboard at the moment? I'm having trouble with it. 79. Okay, so we're going to look at this and we're going to say, what happens if we, pardon my duck in the background. I don't know what he's doing up. It's 4:13 AM and he seems to be awake. Okay, let's have a look at this. Let's see if we can make some sense of these numbers using graphs, which tells us much more about the data than does the simple use of a table. I hate tables. I absolutely loathe them. I don't know why, but they're not, to me, they mean nothing. Now it seems to me I'm much more of a what would you call me? I'm more visual than I am numbers oriented, so I like the vision of it. Let me just give you an example. Now you should be able to do this with your program, but if not, there are many that can. What we're going to do here is look at this row of numbers here, the costs. We've got 14, 6, 10, blah blah blah. These are all percentages, and we're going to create a chart, and I'm just going to choose a very basic bar chart here that comes out. Now let me just run this chart up over the top of the data so you can see it. There's the chart. Now I'm going to change the variables so that they work like this. There we are. Now we've got something which is quite different. Let's have a look. Put this chart down here and get it up so you can see it. Now, you probably can't see the whole thing. You might be able to. I'll see if I can get it up a bit further. There we are. Now that makes more sense to me. Now I can look at that and I can say, God, what's that great big bloody purple thing? Body stressing. Damn, that stuff's dangerous, right? Because this is a percent of the cost. So it's the distribution of costs. We're only looking at that. We can see that it's over 37.5%, more than that, it's about 40%. So it's pretty big. Falls, trips and slips are pretty big as well. Hitting objects not so big. Heat, radiation, electricity. As you can imagine, a lot of safety going on there. However, see, the cost. The interesting thing with the cost is that I'm not quite sure how they calculate the cost. Let's say it's, if it's recovery, looking after a person over a long period of time as a result of something, an injury, say they lose a leg or their back's stuffed and they can't work anymore and they have a large payout, that's going to be very costly. Often with heat, radiation, electricity, you're dead. So you actually don't cost much at all. That could be why we see heat, radiation and electricity as a minimal cost basis, because it kills people. It's a little bit like I was going to say it's a little bit like the Ebola virus, that actually isn't a very effective virus because it kills people so quickly that it doesn't spread very well. Now, I've worked for many years in the electricity industry, and I know there are quite a number of deaths as a result of using just standard, not even high HV, what they call high voltage lines, because they're very careful with high voltage. You sort of suited up with enormous great rubber gloves and many different things. A lot of the guys who get zapped are on standard local, 2-phase or 3-phase power grids and just get careless or forget and end up being zapped and die. So it's not hard to die in that field. That might be something we see of it. But at least we can start to see some comparative values visually. Now that's just looking at a bar graph, and we see, I don't know whether it makes any difference if we look at it with let's try a basic pie chart. And once again we've got the same thing up here. I'll just get rid of my bar graph. I'll leave these on the thing so you can see them, but when I save it. Okay, so there's another one again. You can see it visually there, 41%. Very large amount from body stressing. But this is only cost, so it's not the incidence. So what would it look like? Does it look the same? Is it that some things are very costly? This is the number of cases, percentage of cases. It's not the number, it's a distribution of cases. So let's do a pie chart of that too and see how they look side by side. There we go. Then we can get ourselves to crawl up here a little bit. And is there really that much difference between the two of them? Not a lot. I mean, you can visually look at it and say there's not anything really dramatically happening that's changed there. Apart from this one here, 17%. Mental stress has a high percentage. In other words, there's as a percentage of injuries and illnesses, it's pretty high, 4%, but it's got it's 9% of the costs. Well, that's kind of counterintuitive, isn't it? Where's mental stress? I'm looking at the wrong one. Mental stress. Oh, mental stress is 4% there. Sorry, looking at the wrong one. Being hit by objects. Okay. So being hit by objects is here too, so it must be working around clockwise. And 10% there, 17% is reflected in the number of incidents, but not so much as a percentage incident wise, not so much in terms of the cost. So, you know, look, the data's kind of interesting, but I'm not sure that it tells us a lot. But what it does do is it gives us a lot of things to ask questions about now. You know, to look at it and say, well, what's going on? And that's really how we start to use graphs, you know, in the same way. So I've got a few of the graphs here you can look at that I've charted out in different ways of charting, so that you can see them in different lights. Looking at distribution costs and in its relationship to cases, which is what we tried to do with the which one was it that we looked at? This one. So just a minute ago we were looking at that. Didn't tell us a great deal of information because it's difficult to compare them. If on the other hand you do it as a bar graph, you can start to see where you're looking at cases versus distribution costs. You can see that the where cases are higher or lower in comparison to the cost. What that tells you, I don't know, because I'd need to see a lot more information. But it starts me off sort of thinking, yeah, okay, Dave, this is where to start looking, and this is why it's so valuable. Get that information. So imagine that you're in an organisation now. This is how, and I'll sum up just to the end of the lecture now. The idea is that if you're in an organisation and you've got, unless it's only just started, you've got information already about a number of different claims that have been made and data that's been collected regarding lost working hours and days and costs. You want to try and get it all into a good little sort of Excel spreadsheet of some sort, and then start filleting it out to get an idea of what you can see, what trends can you see. And we'll do next time more on looking at trends, looking at analysing things over a period of time. And the most important, I'm going to come back to the slides here, the most important thing we're going to be looking at is where are my slides? What am I doing here? Probability, I suppose, is what you're looking at. So inferring, you know, probability. What's the probability of something happening when you're looking at the descriptive statistics? How likely is that going to be a problem, and what is the cost of that problem once you've started playing around with it? Okay, look, I hope I haven't made it too sort of too difficult. I really hope that you got something out of it, and I shall try and bring it more together. This is really just designed to be an introduction, and I'll do one on each bit. I always assume that you know nothing. That's the safest way of doing it, and then we can so they may be a bit, you know, beneath your intellect, and for which I apologise, and you can just, you know, forget about them. But there will be some people out there who've never done stats at all and don't know numbers and hate maths, and I've got to say that I have often fitted into that category in my past until I started to fall in love with them, and that was my downfall. Okay, with that, I'll see you. Goodbye.